All right, bringing our panel this hour, joined by political strategists Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker. Good to see you both. Just on the Tasmanian election result, look, you know, Jackie Lambie obviously saying they're going to work hard in 4 years' time, but it was a disappointing result for them over the weekend. Grahame, a pretty good night for Will Hodgman, though. What was your take out of this Tasmanian
That it
result?
was a terrific result for Will Hodgman. That's only the second time since 1987, and in those days, you know, John Howard was in opposition, well and truly in opposition, and about to get rolled. So that's a long time ago. And to get 50% plus of the vote in sort of today's environment where incumbents are being knocked off everywhere was a wonderful result. I thought 33 wasn't all that brilliant for the Labor Party, and the Green result was a shocker. And Jackie, I think, is entitled to be a bit disappointed where she thought she was going to be. But it shows you that if you have a decent leader, you have a good economic story, and you perform economically, people in Tasmania are actually starting to feel a bit of pride about their state. And that's a bit unusual.
The big question for Labor, Bruce, was the pokies ban, their policy to ban pokies in pubs and clubs, a mistake?
Well, look, I'm not sure that it was, and I think there's been polling that suggests that most people were supportive of it. The problem is, though, that when you come in with a policy to ban something, then you're in a way leading with your chin, because you get all those vested interests coming out and attacking you and saying jobs are going to go, which is a big problem, particularly in a state like Tasmania, where every job is sacred. And I think that was probably a problem for Labor in that election campaign. The other feature of it I thought that was interesting was that they definitely both sides seemed to campaign around state issues. And I thought that was a smart move by the Liberals, given how much the federal Liberal Party's on the nose, to be able to restrict it to state issues. Wasn't a bad move. But on the other hand, Labor has picked up an extra couple of seats. The Libs lost 2. But Will Hodgman got 50% of the vote, and you can't argue with that. That was a good result.
Yeah, on South Australia, less than 2 weeks ago now for that election contest, we've seen a Newspoll showing big drop in support for the Nick Xenophon team, or SA Best. From what I'm being told, this is looking increasingly like the Liberals are going to be the favourite to win in a majority. Grahame, what's your sense of it?
Well, we've seen the Liberals be in front for quite a while in South Australia in various elections and just fall short.
Yep.
Certainly the polling on the ground at the moment is not too bad. The Nick Xenophon gloss has come off, and he's not going to do as well as he and others thought originally, but he's still going to do all right. And his preferences will certainly be very important as to who governs the state or to what size a government majority might be. But it does look, for the first time in a long time, that a lot of those rusted-on Labor people who just cannot think of having anything but a Labor government have turned a bit. Now, whether or not they stay, with about 10 days to go, who knows? Anything can happen in a final period in South Australia. But at the moment, the Libs have their nose in front, and it looks, for the first time in a long time, as if a leader, Stephen Marshall, has a team that actually knows why it wants to govern. Whereas in the past, they seem to be comfortable in opposition.
Yeah, Bruce, what's your read on South Australia right now? What are you hearing?
Well, for a start, you would expect that Marshall and the Liberals would be winning this election and winning it comfortably. They've been in opposition for 16 years. 16 years, since 2002, when Mike Rann had his remarkable victory and continued to build up that majority in 2006, held on in 2010, and then and Jay Weatherill held on again in 2014. So you would expect that this would be Marshall's election. I think, though, that what we're seeing is a highly tactical election campaign, and it won't be built on star power by anyone particularly. It'll be all about who runs in what seats and where the preferences go. Because even though Xenophon's support is dropping away on the basis of one of those polls we've seen, if he comes second, then he's in a very strong position to pick up on the preferences of either the Liberal or the Labor candidate who came third. So it's going to be highly tactical what happens. It's going to be a seat-by-seat election like no other.
Which is why the preferences in the seat-by-seat really matter. We showed earlier one of the Labor how-to-vote cards in the upper house preferencing the Australian Conservatives, Cory Bernardi's party, above Xenophon. Apparently in some seats that's what the Australian Conservatives are doing as well, helping Labor above the Xenophon team. So those sort of trade-offs, Bruce, will count at the end of the day.
Oh, they most certainly will, and they happen in all election campaigns. They're not necessarily the most edifying exercises in politics, but they do happen, and they've been happening for as long as I've been involved in or observing politics. We'll just have to wait and see how all those numbers fall. But I think it could be a very interesting night. I thought earlier that Xenophon was going to really, potentially be a very serious threat to them. And he still might be. That's true. He still might be. But right now, we would get the sense that there seems to be a bit of a return to a status quo type election where the two major parties are playing it out, but his preferences are going to be critical, as are theirs.
Yeah, a couple of weeks to go. We'll see how a lot can happen in that time. Look, if the Liberals are doing OK in South Australia, they had a good win in Tasmania. What's going wrong federally? The Newspoll today, number 28. The government's been behind the two-party preferred result, 47 to Labor's 53. And even on preferred Prime Minister, the gap really tightening up to just a 2-point lead now for Malcolm Turnbull. Grahame, as you know, 30 Newspoll defeats is one of the reasons, big reasons, Turnbull used to dump Abbott.
And Malcolm won. At that stage, Tony Abbott was not going to win. But 30 Newspolls...
Well, that's going to be contested. For 30, you never know the
No, it's not. No, it's not. I saw the polling. And the women's voted collapsed. They weren't coming back. Tony was headed for defeat. Malcolm won, although, not brilliantly. And it wasn't a great campaign. Look, between now and 2 more fortnights, so 2 more polls, anything could happen. Look, there could be the videos of the Labor front bench dancing nude around a cactus in the moonlight. You could have... You could have...
I'm not joking about any of this stuff now, but...
Pictures of Mr Shorten and Tanya Plibersek, biting the heads off chickens.
Okay.
But unlikely.
You're on thin ground there, Grahame, talking about politicians.
I need one of these dump buttons here where we can just,
No. Yeah, anyway, look, the answer is there are going to be 30 polls.
There will be.
And how the Prime Minister deals with that would be important.
How do you think he should deal with it?
Look, it's got to be self-deprecating. This is not the phrase, but it's something like, it seemed a good idea at the time, or, I've had better moments in my life, or something that doesn't really...
Yeah.
Sit there and argue the point about X, Y, or Z. He's got to deal like the old Malcolm would have dealt with it, with a bit of a shrug and a clever line and a bit of a smirk and move on.
Yeah, Bruce. What would you advise? Because he is going to have to deal with it. Barring, as Grahame probably rightly says, something remarkable happening in the next 2 fortnights. We're going to get to number 30.
Look, whatever he says, he's going to have to come up with something that will be then dismissed by everybody as being lame. All he can do is get through that day and then continue on his way. And, for as long as he's there, it's probably a good day for Labor. I think the fact that Shorten has closed the gap in preferred Prime Minister is telling, because that is something which tells us more probably about Turnbull than anything else. The public are just losing what confidence they had in him. So I think what this 30th poll will do is just give rise to a whole raft of leaks and backgroundings by disgruntled members of the backbench, probably 2 of whom have only just recently joined the backbench. One of whom's only just joined the backbench, and that will lead to more talk about his leadership. This is going to be something that will trigger a whole range and raft of other problems for him. It's just a question about whether there's anybody out there who could really seriously take him on for the Prime Ministership within the Liberal Party, and whether there's any stomach after all the changes that we've seen in recent years on both sides of politics to ditch him? They're the big questions that we're going to see played out and discussed in the coming weeks.
Speaking of one of those newly installed backbenchers, Barnaby Joyce, Bruce, Laura Jays' report today about what was said between the two of them, he and Malcolm Turnbull a few weeks back. Look, the Prime Minister's office denies this is what happened, but, you know, clearly this appears to be something that's being recounted, and not just to Laura Jays about what went on in the meeting, but to other Nationals figures as well. It does go to a point you're making there about, well, does Barnaby Joyce really think Malcolm Turnbull is the best person to be Prime Minister right now?
Well, I don't think he does. I don't think he ever really has. It was always a difficult relationship between the two, from what I could see in their respective roles as Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. I believe that conversation would have taken place. And I'm not saying that just to be mischievous. It just sounds like the sort of thing that would have been said in the heat of the moment when Barnaby had his back to the wall. And, of course, once you say that, it's all over.
Yeah, Grahame, this on top of yesterday's story where Barnaby Joyce spoke to Fairfax Media and suggested there was a bit of grey area about the paternity of the baby that's on the way. Of course, he'll love him and raise him as his own, he says. But what do you make of all this?
Well, look, I would really, really hope that the next time we see and hear from Barnaby, he's cuddling a little baby and he's being very supportive of his new mate. Full stop. I don't think anything that's happened in the last couple of months has been helpful for anybody. And just, you know, some of the utterances, all right, the journos are coming up with these cockamamie things and putting them to him, but he's responding before it even hits the media. And you think, mate, you know, you're experienced enough to know not to jump at journalistic questions. Doesn't matter what they are. But look, it hasn't helped anyone. It certainly hasn't helped the coalition. But from a personal point of view, I'm just not quite sure where Barnaby's head is. And I just think it'd be fantastic if he went away for a little while and comes back smiling with a new baby, his new mate. Fantastic. But at the moment, he is contributing terribly to an aura and an image around himself, and it's hurting everybody.
On that note,